Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and Happy New Year. Wow, hard to believe that we've started yet another year, but it's an exciting time because in the event industry, especially the wedding side, this is when so many newly engaged couples are starting to plan their weddings. And so it's a very dynamic time of year. And I want to say, too, that I've got some very new things coming for the wedding biz this year. And one of them I started actually about a month ago, which is to have multiple guest co-hosts of The Next Level, the add-on segment, in which my co-host and I discuss the highlights of the interview of the day so that we can translate them into tips and advice for industry pros and couples as well for weddings. And it often extends to events in general. And shortly, you're going to hear from our first guest of the year, the editor-in-chief of very popular regional wedding publication, Washingtonian Weddings. And one of the many things she talks about, it was such a great conversation, but one of the things she brings up is the importance of music at any wedding and event. And many of you know that I'm not just the host of The Wedding Biz, I also have a music and entertainment company called Kushner Entertainment, which is very different than typical talent companies in that everything we do is treated with a high-touch service. It's like a boutique kind of a company. Myself and my passionate team really gets to know every client, as well as planner, designer, and collaborate and create a customized experience, which is so much more than just having a great band show up. And so I would love to also tell you that one of the things I've been working on is a brand new site. I'm so excited because we just released it just in time for the new year. And I'd love for you to check it out and also learn why we're so different by going to KushnerEntertainment.com. Again, KushnerEntertainment.com. And you've probably heard of many of our exclusive acts, including Sound Connection, which has a worldwide reputation, and Rhythm 6, and Sound Nation, and Pop Culture Strings, and we have so much more. And speaking of the high-touch service that I mentioned, if you missed last week's episode, it was Lynn Easton, a wonderful planner designer, Lynn Easton of Easton Events. It was an incredible conversation covering the importance of so many things, including branding your event and how she creates this high-touch concept service and so much more. And I'm excited to say that I interviewed her again just recently, and we're going to be releasing part 2 with Lynn Easton within the next couple of months, so be sure to look for that. So today's guest, I'm so excited to announce, is a great one for both engaged couples and industry professionals, and that's Amy Moeller, Editor-in-Chief of Washingtonian Weddings, the DMV regional go-to guide for everything couples need to plan their special day, from vendor partners to etiquette to advice to inspiration. Prior to joining Washingtonian, Amy was the editor of Capital File, a popular regional publication. And don't forget to listen again to the follow-on segment, The Next Level, in which my co-host and I talk about the interview with Amy. And the guest co-host for today is a wonderful planner and designer out of the Washington, D.C. metro area, Michelle Hodges, who herself appeared on the show back on August 6th of last year. So be sure to check out Michelle's interview August 6th. So enjoy my conversation with Amy Moeller. So Amy, thank you so much for agreeing to being on The Wedding Biz. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really cool.
Oh, it's going to be fun. So you have been really busy, like not only being editor-in-chief of Washingtonian Weddings, but you recently had a baby.
I did. I had my second baby.
Oh, it's your second?
My second, yes. I have a 2-year-old at home and a 3-month-old.
3 months ago, and here you are, full force, boy or girl?
Boy.
Aw. Well, I actually am going to want to come back to that because it's interesting, having a full career and being able to balance, and I definitely want to get into that. But, I know, Amy, that Washingtonian Weddings has a tremendous reputation being the go-to guide for everything that couples need, from being a resource for vendors, or as I like to call them, partners. I want to change that, to etiquette, advice, inspiration. And you all have had a major change in your brand because you were known forever as Washingtonian Bride and Groom, and you just changed to Washingtonian Weddings. What prompted that change now?
I think it's time. Bride and Groom was named Bride and Groom not to be exclusive to couples that are brides and grooms, but because they wanted to put an emphasis on the groom to suggest that grooms can take part in planning as well. That, over the years, that name has evolved to something that is not as inclusive as we would like it to be, or the perception of the name, I should say. And so it's been something that has been talked about for a while. When I joined Washingtonian 2 years ago, it was one of the first conversations that came up was changing the name. And so we just really made a push for it this year. A lot goes into kind of a rebrand, especially of brand that is so well known regionally. So we wanted to make sure that the Washingtonian component was really strong and really recognizable so that when you saw Washingtonian Weddings, you knew it was the same company, but with a name that really is more reflective of what we're all about, which is couples.
Yeah, inclusive, right? I mean, LGBTQ community, everybody, whoever, basically. I'd like to go back a bit and get some of your backstory, Amy, because that really helps inform, who you are today and what it is that you're bringing to Washingtonian Weddings. You are in a very influential position as editor-in-chief. Was being in the media world something that you aspired to from a young age in any way?
So it's really interesting because I changed my major 7 times in college.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Tennessee.
Okay. Wait, did you say 7 times?
Yes. I think I technically went to the guidance office or, whatever that area is called and changed it probably 3 or 4 times on record. But there were a few times where I met with my advisor and I discussed different paths. So I set out on 7 different paths before I landed on journalism and electronic media with a concentration in sports journalism, coincidentally. But I think that is funny looking back because in high school, I was the editor-in-chief of my high school newspaper. So why I didn't know that was where I wanted to go kind of boggles my mind. And I remember being really young and loving magazines, loving glossy magazines.
Oh, really? Even when you were little, it drew your attention.
Yes. Yeah. Tiger Beat, all like really young.
No, I have a daughter.
Yeah. So I've always loved to read. I've always loved to write. So I think it's only been in the last year or two that I've looked back and seen that the path was there all along.
So you're really manifesting it now.
Yeah. And I didn't see it all along. So I started at Tennessee journalism and electronic media with an interest or concentration in sports journalism. And then I graduated and I joined To Digital Sports, which is it's not around anymore, but it was a online sports media company that covered high school sports. It was based out of Baltimore. And I was the editorial assistant. So every night, all of the reporters would go out and go to games in Baltimore and Anne Arundel County, Howard County, and they would send me scores and quick recaps.
That you had to have ready in the morning?
Yes. So I was typing them all in, putting them on the back end every single day. And it was it's fascinating how many people really care. And if you didn't have those scores in, people were checking Friday night for Friday night games to see who won. And so I had to have those scores in immediately. And at first I was remote and I was only the back end. And then I started going out on my own and covering some of those games. It was very, very, very fun.
Yeah, well, and I know that, eventually you became the editor-in-chief of Capital File magazine covering lifestyle. And then you came here. What is it about weddings that got your attention?
So before I was a journalism major with a concentration in sports journalism, I wanted to be a wedding planner.
You wanted to be a planner?
Yeah.
How come?
I've always loved to plan things. I have a very bizarre combination of a planner, organization, and a wildly messy creative side. So I think those weddings were exciting to me. And I think that was wedding planning requires a lot of that, requires a lot of creativity and improv and also a lot of planning and organization. So I really enjoy being on this side of that now, but that was definitely an interest in college.
Did you actually plan some weddings?
I did not. I did a lot of sort of coursework surrounding that, learning how to set up a venue floor plan, how many inches across a placemat should be.
Yeah, so some of the logistical basics.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went into sports writing. And then when I was working for What's Up magazine in Annapolis, I was planning my wedding. And the editor of the wedding, they have a What's Up Weddings magazine. And the editor of that magazine asked me to start blogging about my planning process.
Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I think probably to get me to stop talking about it.
No, but it's so serendipitous, right? It's so interesting, this whole path of yours, and it's all kind of coming together.
It all totally came together, which I really did not see that come. It's only been recently that I've looked back and been like, that was kind of, all working its way towards this.
But I love that you have a passion for weddings and for the planning aspect and design. And then here you are, editor-in-chief of a major regional, publication. And I think that has a lot to do with it, right? The passion.
Yeah. And I think, people ask me a lot how on earth sports and weddings are the two things that I could have been interested in. And I think that if you ask people, who have recently gotten married, like, the happiest time of their life. Well, for a lot of people, it was when they were planning their wedding or on their wedding day. And for a lot of people, it was playing high school sports. If you look back on those like glory days of, high school championships and that kind of thing, those are really good times in a lot of people's lives. And I think that at the root of it, I love being a part of those celebrations. I love that I get to capture or help capture through print writing some of the best days of people's lives. And they're so vastly different. But I think that you go on for decades reflecting really positively on your wedding planning and playing high school sports. I was not good at high school sports, so those glory days are slightly less glorious for me. But I really can appreciate, how fun it is for high school athletes and what a great time that is. And then what a great time it is to be getting married and planning your wedding.
What was one of the biggest memorable moments for you for your wedding?
Oh, we had a pretty small wedding there. We had 97 people. And so I remember at one point looking out at the dining area and there was not a single person sitting down. Every single person was on the dance floor. And I remember thinking like every person that I love on this planet is right here on this dance floor. And that was just like really awesome. The other thing that I think, I have 3 sisters that I'm very close to. And when I got married, it was like the time of flash mobs. So we talked about doing like a flash mob and we didn't. But for a while, we really practiced. All 3 of us live in this area and one lives in North Carolina. But I think at the time, even one of us was still in college. So we had lived all over. And I sent around a video of Tina Turner performing Proud Mary. And I was like, you all learn this dance because this is going to be our flash mob dance. Yeah. Which was silly. And, eventually we kind of laughed off and we were like, we're never going to do that. Well, by pure coincidence, the band played Proud Mary.
Oh, and you had the moves down.
All of us knew how to do it. Yes.
Oh, that's great. So you all got up and you had a big moment.
So it was like the very end of the night. And I just remember the 4 of us. I mean, it was terrible and we were not dancers, but it was just really fun. And I remember thinking how funny that he would, they would play Proud Mary and that we would all of these things.
So what is your day-to-day like now as editor-in-chief, Washingtonian Weddings?
Probably not as glamorous as people think. It's really fun. I come in, it depends on the day because we produce 2 magazines a year, Winter Spring, which just went to print over Thanksgiving week, and then Summer Fall, which goes to print in June. So leading up to those months, it's a lot of planning for the issue, a lot of editing, writing. I always have papers, call them proofs, all over my office, everywhere. It's very busy during that time. Kathy Merrill Williams, who's the president of Washingtonian, she commented one time because she saw me walking by and I was wearing like jeans and a t-shirt and I was carrying a bag of cashews, which was to be my dinner that day. And she laughed and she said, I think that when people think of your job, they think that you're always in like, dressed up and out, sipping champagne. And she was like, little do they know your dinner is cashews on the floor of your office, like
I saw your office, by the way. It wasn't the neatest.
It is not neat. It is, it's messy. But I have a system. I know where things are. It's generally covered in Post-its and printouts most of the time. But I come in and we go through I keep a run list of all the stories that are going to be in a print issue. And so kind of every morning I go through that list to see what status everything is. We have a lot of meetings, a lot of brainstorming sessions. During crunch time, we do a lot of photo shoots. Also not as glamorous as they sound, but still very fun and very rewarding. And then there's like a little period of maybe like 4 to 6 weeks twice a year just after an issue goes to print where we kind of sit back and we look through, the world and see the region and see what's going on and try to absorb as much information as we can and see what trends are starting to blossom and think about what couples are going to want to see in the next issue.
Well, now that's a big topic. Publications like yours tend to help set the trends, at a minimum capture them, and communicate them. What do you see as being some current trends that are happening and what might be coming down the pike?
So what's really interesting about wedding trends is that they stick around for kind of an exceptionally long time, longer than, like a fashion trend would. And we touched on this at a panel that I was on a couple of months ago, and I thought it was just really interesting. But a trend pops up, and then someone who is not engaged sees it on Pinterest or Instagram or somewhere and, kind of appreciates it, pins it maybe on Pinterest. And then it's not for a couple of years that they get to actually implement that. And a lot of times by that point, you're not interested in changing. You've been thinking about what your wedding will look like for a long time. And so you're hanging on to something that maybe first kind of came out a couple of years ago. So the timing of the trends is interesting in that way. But I think a few things that are new and maybe kind of been flying under the radar, but starting to really take hold on the logistics side, small bridal parties or wedding parties is one thing.
The bridal party itself or the whole reception? The
wedding party itself. So only choosing a few attendants, groomsmen.
Why do you think that is? Any thoughts to that? Is it just wanting more intimacy, maybe?
I think it's more intimate. I think it is a search for simplicity in an otherwise very grand event. It's much simpler to just call on the very few closest people in your life than it is to... I had 8 bridesmaids at my wedding, and I certainly don't regret that. But I see, now a lot of people have 2 or 3, and it's just simple, and it's, you can really cherish that time with those people. So that's something that I see that I really love. Winter weddings are becoming more popular.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it used...
You're saying in cold climates?
Yes, even here. I think, for a long time, June was the time to get married. Then October was the time to get married. And I think you're seeing a lot more winter weddings than we were before. I think on one hand, there's a lot of very dreamy elements to a winter wedding. If you happen to get snow on your wedding, it's so romantic.
After people have arrived.
Yes, after people have arrived. And you definitely don't want to think about the logistics of that beforehand. I mean, you should think about the logistics, but you shouldn't dwell on those logistics.
Hey, it's great pictures and great feeling.
Right. The pictures are very romantic. It's kind of, there's something very dreamy about, a cold winter wedding. And also the rest of the year is so unpredictable. We've had so much rain this year that getting married in June does not mean that you're going to have a nice sunny day. So, you could roll the dice and hope for some snow.
Yeah.
And then another thing that we're seeing more of are patterns. So it used to be you would choose a color palette of 2 colors. Blush and gold was insanely popular for a long time. And now more so than 2 colors, it's often, like plaid inspired or, I have been noticing recently a lot of really talented planners have taken some inspiration from like pieces of tile that you find. And I think that's really neat, but it's much bolder than what we'd seen before.
It's interesting. I mean, I had Pablo Oliveira from Nuage Designs on the show, major guy. And he was talking about how it's also changing to the point where it's like anything goes and a lot of mixing and matching. And it's not necessarily, one palette or one pattern. It's interesting.
Just layer it on. Just beyond color, there's pattern and then textures that you can layer on.
And you could just kind of mix it all. Also, I'm understanding that, and I wonder how you feel about this if you're noticing this here, that more couples now are contributing to their own weddings, than just and so, I'm thinking, what does that mean? Well, they're feeling more empowered. They have more of the decision making. There's this whole new thing going on, people in the industry trying to figure out about, I hate to label, but in a sense, millennials having more of the decision making process. It's very different than the parents. Are you finding that too?
Absolutely. And people are waiting longer to get married. They're not staying engaged longer. That's another trend that we're seeing. Engagements are getting shorter and shorter, but they are waiting until later in life to get married, millennials especially.
The demographic's getting older.
Right. And they are, more inclined to foot the bill for their own wedding and make their own decisions and curate their own guest list that way. I think I don't know if that's a big factor that goes into the decision to do that, but it's certainly a result of that.
How do you feel that this empowerment and having more decision making is impacting the industry?
I think it's making way for a lot of rules to be broken. Very like traditional sort of old school rules are going by the wayside and people are sort of doing whatever they want, which is really interesting and fun. And I always say, it's a great time to wed in Washington, but it really is. It's really fun. And there aren't a lot of sort of traditions that you have to keep. We see a lot of the real weddings that we come in that say, I skipped the bouquet toss or I skipped
or they're doing the cake cutting just for a picture. They're not making a big deal.
Right.
And it's interesting you mentioned bouquet toss because I'm in entertainment. I haven't seen a bouquet toss and I can't even think.
I know.
And that used to be a big highlight of the night. But again, I love, like you say, how people are kind of coming up with their own ways. There's no more rules anymore. It's okay.
Right. And there are some very cool traditions, obviously, that people will carry with them. And a lot of people, so there are a lot of sort of heirloom moments that people are carrying with them. Like I saw recently someone I think they used a book that their great grandmother made of her. It was the list of gifts that she received and her thank you notes to everyone.
Wow.
And she included that on their table where they had guests sign in. We still see people including framed photographs of marriages and wedding days of their family. So I think there's still a lot of nostalgia and sort of these sort of heirloom moments, but the traditions that are maybe less personal, like the bouquet toss, are being skipped.
I just want to take a moment and say, wouldn't we all like to have more exposure in our markets? I mean, certainly our own handling of social media and various other tools are ways that we do gain more presence. Though, what if you could have professional outside help that you could depend on to really get you the results that you need? And I know we all are happy to get much more presence. Well, I want to tell you about our sponsor of today, OFD Consulting. They are an award-winning publicity agency that focuses on the wedding industry, and their client portfolio ranges from top-tier planners and venues to well-regarded national brands and industry thought leaders. And OFD Consulting has placed clients in a slew of popular online and offline publications, including the New York Times, Martha Stewart Weddings, Style Me Pretty, many others. And they also have a service that's dedicated entirely to B2B press for those looking to elevate their brand reputation among peers through online mentions, guest articles, podcasts, and speaking engagements. So if you are a small business and you want to get your name out there, get more exposure for your brand, get your message out there, and you want to just dip your toes in the PR waters, check out the OFD Collective, which is a 3-star membership with robust educational and coaching opportunities, along with ongoing press leads. So definitely check out ofdconsulting.com. Again, that's ofdconsulting.com. Also, it's interesting when you talk about couples being older, waiting a little longer, and again, contributing to their own weddings. It makes me think that I believe I heard a statistic just in the past year that a third have children already. Maybe not between them. It might be previous or together, but I'm hearing more and more than way back have kids.
That's fascinating. I have not heard that statistic, but we do see more often the wedding submissions that we get. Part of the wedding party are children, either together or from previous relationships.
How is the whole online media presence affecting you? I mean, this is pretty heavy because you've got a wonderful online presence. You still have the print, the magazine. How is this affecting you now?
We're really embracing it. I mean, I think that the web is a great place to find inspiration and quick tips and, very visual. And I think people search for what they're looking for a lot. I think people do a lot of wedding planning while they're at work, and so a little click during their lunch break. And we try to be a part of that and make our website and our social media presence as helpful as a resource as we can. Mm-hmm. I also think, though, that when people get engaged, a print magazine is a nice gift. Something in print is a fun thing to hold and flip through, and I think they can work together really beautifully.
See, I was going to ask you if you see a time where, with Washingtonian here, where the print will go away, it'll just be digital.
I hope not. I hope not. I love print, and I think that there is something really nice about having something physical that you can look through. Mm-hmm. You saw my office, there's a lot of Post-its. I think a lot of times writing things down on paper can help you sort through a planning process and help you sort through your own thought process. And, I got engaged in June, and the next day we happened to have a family vacation planned. And so I remember that my sisters brought wedding magazines. And so we sat on the beach and we flipped through wedding magazines. And it was just...
It's different than sitting with a laptop out there or an iPad.
Exactly. So there's something about that, it's all dog-eared and full of like notes. And there's something very calming, I think, about that. And I think that sometimes you can get overwhelmed online. I know that's something that we think about with our website, trying to make it so that you're not just completely overstimulated and you don't have just too many places to go and things to look at. But I think having the print package can help you sort of reel it in.
But I wonder, though, like on the digital side, how has the immediacy of it, the ability to instantly get access, but not only get access, share content, like the couples out there, like even wedding pics, they can share immediately. And, how do you feel that has affected the industry and even yourself, right? Because you would get these pictures, and in a little bit I want to talk about submissions and how people get in, how you make that decision. But nowadays, pictures could be released on Instagram before it gets to the magazine.
Yeah, I think that if you can, as far as the industry goes, position yourself as a part of that, it can be really, really great. I think it helps to open the lines of communication between couples who are planning their wedding and potential vendors. It helps them find potential vendors in a very low pressure way where they can just scroll through and find, sources of inspiration and people that they like. They can snapshot those things and send them to friends and family or, their wedding party or their vendors to kind of share ideas. And I think that it's helping a lot of the really beautiful things that are happening in the industry find a forever home. That is something that on the print side, obviously it's nice to have a print keepsake that you can keep forever. But if your work goes on to live online, people will find it for years and years.
Well, and speaking of that, do you find that couples and even industry people are tagging Washingtonian weddings?
Yeah, absolutely. We find a lot of new projects and new events and new vendors that way.
So you're keeping a good eye on that, and that grabs your attention. And pictures, I imagine video too, both.
Yes, absolutely. Which is, video is the digital world is a great resource for video because that's something that we can't convey in print, but it can go to live there.
What overall is your social media strategy? At this point, it's become such a huge part, again, for couples and for the industry.
It is. So our print magazine, we try to answer a lot of like the how-to questions and the logistical questions. And then our digital presence, we hope to be very inspirational. It's very visual. Haley is the assistant editor for Washingtonian Weddings, and I tease her all the time because she's obsessed with our Instagram grid. You have very little time when someone comes to your Instagram or your website or whatever to grab their attention and to show who you are. And Instagram, that's 9 squares that you see when you immediately pull it up. So we want to make sure that visually it's very aesthetically pleasing, that we are reaching out and building community with the people and the vendors in the region and showcasing their work and making sure that they're, included in our tagging and that kind of thing, so that when couples come to our website and see, these beautiful images, they can also see who made them happen and who created them, who took the photos and what vendors were involved. So I think the digital side is really essential in creating that community. And that I love what you said earlier about calling them partners instead of vendors. And it's very true. And Washington has a very unique, sort of tight-knit wedding community, and we are so thrilled to be a part of it. And I think that, we try to include as many local vendors as we can in each print issue, but also on the web. That's really a place to foster community.
What is the best way for the industry and then also for couples to submit, and what is it that you're looking for?
So we do an all call twice a year that we send out to all the vendors on our guide, all the vendors that we have featured in the past, partners that we've worked with, people that have caught our attention online or out in the world, and we ask them to submit real weddings. So there's a process. There's a special email, realweddings@washingtonian.com, and we have couples and planners. It's generally, we get most of the submissions from planners and photographers. Occasionally we'll have a florist that says, hey, I did this really great wedding. Here are the vendors, and they'll get them to send those in. We do get some submissions from couples themselves as well, but we have a form that everyone fills out to let us know, the date and the venues and all of the key players. And then we spend just an insane amount of time going through all of those submissions.
What grabs you? Because I imagine you're going through tons and tons of submissions. Like, what is it that grabs you? Is it more of like an emotional kind of feeling? Is there...
Often it's when we see something we haven't seen before.
Can you give me an example?
Oh, gosh. Yes. So recently we shared a wedding that was designed by Grit and Grace, and it was at Dock 5. And when I first clicked through the photos, Dock 5 is sort of like a warehousey space. It's very industrial. It's really a blank slate. And I think what really struck me when I clicked on the photos is that I had no idea where the wedding was. I mean, I couldn't tell at all. And Dock 5 is sort of an industrial blank slate, but you don't really know where the people are going to take that. In this particular wedding, I mean, it was just so beautifully outfitted, and it was just...
And here's what you can do with like that kind of a space.
Yes. They use these beautiful rugs as aisle runners, which I'd never seen done before. I mean, rugs that a couple then put in their home, which was just kind of a neat thing.
Oh, that's neat, yeah.
So yeah, I think when I open a link to photos of a venue that I know well, and I can't tell that that's where that is, there's a lot of creativity that went into that and a lot of design planning that went into that. And that definitely caught our attention.
And how do you decide what editorial topics and coverage that you're going to do?
So we spend a lot of time sort of putting our feelers out with local couples, especially online and in social media, to kind of see what people are talking about, what questions people are asking. We host small events throughout the year with local vendors to get feedback on what kinds of, not only what trends they're seeing, but also what questions they're being asked, because we see part of our job as answering some of those questions before they're asked of the vendors. So that is a very common question that I ask people and partners that we work with is, what are you being asked? What don't people know right now? And what do people want to know? And how can we help guide them or answer those questions? So we take that feedback heavily into play.
I also saw a blog that you wrote about a bride who wore a light blue Ines de Santo gown. And by the way, I interviewed her. She was on the show. It was great.
Really?
Ines, such a special person. And also her daughter, Veronica, who's the managing partner. It was released October 1st of this year. Yeah. But it was interesting because you were talking about, I guess, brides now are looking for more unexpected dress choices.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, light blue. Was that the wedding at the top of the hay?
That's right.
Yeah. Gorgeous dress. It was very pale blue. So it was, subtly new and unexpected. I mean, obviously a blue dress is going to be unexpected, but the silhouette was very beautifully traditional. But yeah, I mean...
It grabbed your attention. I mean, it got in.
Yes. Well, a light blue dress at the top of the hay.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
I know. And, I want to say here too, because the Wedding Biz Network, we've got Julie Sabatino and the Stylish Bride. She's hosting a show on it. Talks all about gown styling tips and everything like that. People should check that out through the Wedding Biz Network. What is it like, I'm thinking, Amy, to be a guest at a wedding? When you're the editor-in-chief of a wedding, magazine publication, you must have some good stories about this.
Well, actually, you know what? I always joke that I went to a lot of weddings before I became the editor, and I haven't been to that many, maybe just a handful since I came to Washingtonian Weddings. I have a few on the calendar next year. But you know what? I think that people who maybe don't know me personally well expect me to go in with sort of a critical eye.
Right. They must be nervous.
Yes. I just don't. I really am inspired by the relationships at weddings. And, I love to see a happy couple. So I'm usually so wrapped up with, the emotion of the day. I'm a very emotional person anyway. Everybody gets on me because I cry when I read these real wedding submissions all the time. And when we have to cut photos, usually, I will help pare them down, and then I have to step away because, if the photo is certain, photos of family members are just like clearly very joyful moments don't make it. I can't stand it. So I can't, but I probably cry once a week reading real wedding submissions.
I love that. But Amy, it's like you are the editor-in-chief of a major, regional wedding publication, and you're moved. I love that.
Oh, gosh, all the time. It's all the time. I'm a mess. I become very personally attached to these weddings. So, we definitely look for something that we don't expect when we're choosing something to run in print. But I personally become very personally attached to a lot of the couples and a lot of the weddings. And, you can feel like you know them when you're reading their story. And it's very hard to choose when you know that for every single person that is submitting their wedding, it was the best day of their life.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard.
You really take that in. That's great.
I mean, I can barely even do the writing back when we say, we're sorry, but we have to pass on this wedding for now. A lot of times
You may have to work on that.
I write on these
have
very
someone else
long,
do it in your place.
I write very long emails about, things that I loved about them because it's really so special, and I think that people expect me to be a little bit jaded or to just see everything as one big wedding, and I can't. I see it so personally. It's a little ridiculous.
I also want to ask you about balancing a career with personal life. It's a very big deal. You got a very big job with a lot of responsibilities, a lot of pressure on you. You just had your second child 3 months ago. Somewhere I read you joined Cafe Mom, a website for mothers. How are you dealing with the balance between being a mother and having such a successful and involved career?
Delicately, and with, a really good support team. My husband is very supportive. He does a lot of the daycare drop-off and pickups. Like I said, I had 3 sisters I'm very close to, and they all have children, and they're very supportive. And then this company is very supportive. My team here is fantastic. You definitely can't balance anything with career without a team that you trust and without a team that, you can help, in times when you need schedule support and that kind of thing. I don't know. I'm still kind of figuring it out 2 years later, like I said, I have a 3-month-old and I have a 2-year-old, and I'm definitely still trying to figure that out.
You got a lot going on.
Yeah. I mean, sleep deprivation is just my new normal. So,
Yeah, but I like how you're talking about the support network that you have, how important that is. Now, I think sometimes it's hard. I mean, I'm a father, and I do feel it's different. I was very present, raising my child is very important to me. Yet I know that still more of it really does lie with the woman. It's harder, balancing all of that. And you almost forget getting in the middle of all that, how overwhelmed. That support network. And I love how you talked about not just personally with family, but with work. Apparently you're open with it. You share it. They support you in it.
It's so critical to have. And I'm very fortunate because I know that is absolutely not something that all working parents have as a support system at work. But even, just last week, my daughter came home with a stomach bug. And so she was fine. My husband stayed home with her, but I didn't want to leave my infant. I had to come in because we were printing. I wanted to come in. I'm sure that everyone would have understood if I had worked from home, but I wanted to be in. So I brought him with me, and no one blinked. No one even asked me why.
Yeah.
And I felt at the end of the day like I had excessively explained why I had brought him with me. But, I feel like 100 times I was like, oh, my toddler has a stomach bug and I don't want them to be near each other. But
I think what I'm hearing you say too is don't feel that you have to hide away and, ask for help. And if you have to show up with your kid.
Yeah, I mean, that is what I wish for all working parents, is that you have work for a company that can allow that. I know a lot of people don't have that kind of flexibility, and I certainly don't take it for granted.
Well, it's going to make you in the end more productive. Frankly, in the end, it's better for them.
Otherwise, I'd be worrying and I'd be distracted. And
so why not embrace it in terms of from an employer standpoint?
Right.
That's wonderful that it does. As we start to get ready to wrap up, I know also that you have a very big event coming up. You've got Washingtonian Wedding's 11th annual premier wedding showcase and runway show called Unveiled.
Yes.
Right? Unveiled. It's taking place January 27th at the time of this recording. It's another couple months at the Mandarin Oriental. I imagine that's the biggest event of the year for you.
It is the biggest event for the year. It is so exciting. It's so much fun. We bring in vendors. We fill the Mandarin Oriental. We have it every year in January. The location sometimes changes. We had it at the Mandarin last year, and we're looking forward to having it there again. We bring in a lot of vendor partners that set up booths, and it's a great time for couples to come and put faces to names and to meet people. So much of the planning process is so personal that it's really important that you don't just like your vendor's work, but that you like your vendors. There's just a lot of back and forth and communication, and you're with them for a long time. So it's a really great place for people to come and meet people and to see what's new. Our vendors do a great job of sort of outfitting their booths, so it's really beautiful and really inspiring. You can get a taste for their aesthetic and get a lot of ideas. There are a lot of treats that go around a wedding showcase like that. We'll have 2 panels to talk about wedding planning and how to choose a photographer. It's very informative, but very fun and lively. And it's a great time to just, bring your closest friends or...
Yeah, you know what you're talking about? Like, to me, what this is all about, weddings, events, any kind, it's about having an experience.
Mm-hmm. That's another huge, trend that's going on right now is the guest experience. There's a lot of emphasis put on guest experience, and, aesthetics to your wedding and design are very important components as well. But you also need to think about how everyone will feel, how you will feel, how your guests will feel, and that is a lot of the emphasis we put on this showcase as well.
That is the first question. I have a music company, Cushner Entertainment, and the first thing my team asks a client, because we really get to know them. It's a whole different thing with the music. We really want to know them and create this special thing. The first question is, how do you want you and your guests to feel? And on first glance, it might be, well, what do you mean? Happy and excited? But no, that reveals a lot of information,
And music is such a big part of that. I mean, there's just, you walk in, and for last year with the showcase, we had like a string quartet playing as you walked in, and then there were various bands playing.
It immediately sets a tone, sets a mood.
Right. And it does for any event. The music is just so important, and it's going to be the best day of your life no matter what, but you should probably have some really awesome music to be the background and the soundtrack, and you'll hear some of those songs again in 20 years, and it will take you right back to your wedding day, and I think that's so important.
You're saying it for me. So what is the best way, for people to find out about Washingtonian weddings and yourself?
So you can go to washingtonian.com/weddings. You can follow us at Wash Weddings on Instagram, find us on Twitter, on Facebook for Washingtonian Weddings. You can log onto the website and we'll send you your first copy of Washingtonian Weddings magazine for free. So if you're getting married, definitely check that out. And I'm all over too. I'm Amy Moeller. I'm on...
And that's Moeller.
Yes, and there's an E in the middle for Elizabeth. So Amy E. Moeller. Just to make it a little bit tricky.
We'll put it in the show notes too. That sounds great. Yeah, and you've got a blog and you've got a lot of wonderful stuff going on. Well, God, Amy, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Amy Moeller, Editor-In-Chief of Washingtonian Weddings. Be sure to check out their website, Washingtonian.com. Again, Washingtonian.com. They can be found on Instagram at Washingtonian Weddings and on Twitter at Wash Weddings. And be sure to check out the show notes at our website of theweddingbiz.com. And would love for you to share this episode with people and help to grow our community. And also be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you get notifications. As you should know, it's free to subscribe. And one more time, I want to mention the next level that follows this, which is co-hosted by Michelle Hodges, a wonderful, very successful planner, designer. So thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.